Yeah, this thing showed up. Not sure what it is just yet. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's big. So probably ought to just see what it is before I start making plans. I'm right in the middle of putting together a 562 that had a crushed handle. And the delivery van came up. So let me unbox it, I guess, first. So before I get into the big box, big saw, I have to figure out what I'm going to do for a bar and chain on it anyway. I need to finish out this little project right here, and that's just swapping out the handle on this 562 that got run over. And I'm taking the lazy way out, and this is not the recommended way. I'm not going to say this is how you do it any way, shape, or form. And I just left all the fuel line and stuff like that in the carburetor in the little tray there, and just yanked the other handle right off. And I'll put this one on. It's sort of funny. I debate whether I should put this on film or not, because what are you going to gain by watching me struggle? You really don't learn anything. So, and plus, I put my other project here on the back burner, and I don't like that. That's my John Thread 630 that I want to build, so Bob and I can do a 200 series chassis mini get together. Got gaskets. I got a new piston, for it. I got a Meteor brand piston. And the reason why I had to get a different piston was all the pistons I had, I didn't have the windows here. They were solid. So Meteor makes a nice product. So that's what's going to go on that saw. And this is a cylinder that's going on it. It's a nice closed port cylinder. This goes on that John Thread 630. And it's a 48 millimeter bore. And that's just compared to these. These are on that 625 that I just pulled that off, and that's a open port cylinder. It's really doesn't run that good. Not sure why, but that's a different deal. Let me see if I can get this together and get it fired up pretty quick. Yeah, they all are. So the lines are on. So now I can get this thing back on. I think I'm gonna go with the newer style T27s on this right here. Alright. Flip this thing over on the side here. Get one in here. And I believe it's this one. Here's your get that fuel filter down at the bottom, and get this in here. All right, what are we going to do for a handle? I think I want to bring it back to full wrap. You know that? This is not a work saw for me. I'm going to have to come up with a new cover too. New cover and a new chain brake. I think both of them got destroyed. There's a little event this had. That's really tight. Make the bottom here firm back up again. I have a lot of 562 work to do. I've had some sitting here for quite some time, and that's not right. You know, I should be much more aggressive in getting stuff like that done. I just haven't. It's my fault. Here. So I'm going to have to rob the bar I had on my 572 XPG, which is a 25 or 24 inch Husqvarna X-Tough bar. The reason is I actually have chain for it. I need to stock up on chain because I haven't done that for the season. And the other thing I want to point out is this is the cover that came off. I used to make these little cutouts there, but I also left the plug in there. And this is what Husky did. And you notice I used to cut out all that in here too. This is what I used to call a cut cover. And then a couple of years later they came along with this one right here. It's going to get a new cover. This one's going to go onto a junk pile somewhere. So this will look like a nicer looking saw for the video channel, right? So now I have a cover. Yeah, nice looking saw. And put these things away. All right, so we have a saw to go check. This will be probably the first and only for a very long time unboxing saw video. That's not the biggest chainsaw I've ever seen, but what the heck am I going to do with this thing? So what I want to do is just do a look-see of what we got here. And that is a very, very large chainsaw right there. And that would be the Holzfforma G3120, which is ostensibly a clone of a big Husqvarna 3120, 120 something cc saw, 115 maybe. So let's just take a look at it. Now, as I was saying, my last Holzfforma experience was a little scary because it was better than I expected. It's got an oiler, a manual oiler. I'm not sure how that all works. Choke. Yeah, I think that's a oiler. I'm not quite sure how it works. It has a typical on-off. See the caps. Pretty much Husqvarna standard. The G395 that I ran for a couple of seasons actually turned out to be a really good saw. And it was easily one that like a county or township or something like that needs a big saw once in a while could invest in and actually get the return on investment. And the one thing I found with the G395 was the quality of the plastic, the casting for the cylinder, the piston, and all that stuff was really a lot better than I would have anticipated. I just was very surprised. Now this one here, my first impression is it's of the same ilk. See, that handle there is a lot better aluminum than some of the early 372s that I had that were, I could bend them like spaghetti. I can just tell you by the feel of it, it's got a lot more stiffness. Now I'm going to probably go and get a OEM handle anyway, because it's what I do. Big, giant saw. Does it have a decomp? Yes, it does. Will it pull over? Yeah. Let's see what it has for air filter. So it's got a decomp here. That cylinder looks nice and clean. I want to just check some things. I've had issues in the past, so I want to check some nuts and bolts and stuff like that, make sure that they're tight. Cylinder and muffler and things like that. But anyway, to finish what my thought was, the G395, that blue saw I had, now I had put a different piston in it. That was a very, very, very pleasant surprise. That saw. All right. Yeah, that's metal. Buck and spite's a little thin, but I'm not going to reef on it so hard that it matters. It's got a in the cover chain adjust. Now my curiosity is what sprocket does it have, because I don't know if I have. That's a 404. So I think what I need to do really before I do much of anything is wrap off that clutch if it'll come off, and see if I can put a 3/8 sprocket on there and put a 28-inch bar. Then at least I can run it, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, the muffler. Yeah, that's not a whole lot of surface area outlet for a big saw like that. Probably going to want to muffler mod that thing pretty darn quick. That's my guess. Let that thing breathe. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do something with this for sure. But, all right. So far, so good. I mean, so far, my first impressions are pretty good. Check it out. See how it's got the sealer in there? That must mean that it has the same kind of a deal like the older Huskies have, where the seal for the PTO side is in the oil pump. Don't know that, but with all that goo there, that tells me that they're thinking about it. I have the sneaky suspicion that if we do a little bit of work, this saw can really... Look at the size of that air filter. Jeez. Let me see what I got with the camera angle this. It's good. That's a big freaking filter. Holy crow, look at this thing. Well, so much for the breathe idea. The carburetor's huge. Now, it takes a little effort. There we go. They're down in there, that's for sure. Wow. There we go. They are down in there. That is absolutely the case. So they're tight. I would just say that starting from that G288 forward, especially the G395, their production quality of build is really a whole lot better than it was back in when I was doing the steel clones. And I would say that my first impression on this saw is more of the same of the G395 ilk versus the other ones. Nice tight assembly of that. Yep, there you are. That's the issue. It's not metric. Which, by the way, is no big deal. Because pretty much a lot of the Huskies of that, yeah, it's tight. A lot of the Huskies of that 80s era, tight. Tight. It's both there and tight. Okay. So the cylinder is tight. So far, everything I've messed with is pretty tight. Harbor Freight to the rescue. Give me a chance to grease the bearing anyway. So there's this clutch. Looks like a clutch, right? Yeah, it's got a big old 447. See if we can put a 3/8 on there. I should have one around somewhere. Here's a 3/8/7. See if it will fit on that same sprocket. It will. All right, so this is a 404. Check out the difference in diameter, right? It's a lot larger. So what I would like to do is see if I can find an 8-pin, because that'll be about the same diameter. Get a little grease. Yeah. Good for them. They have it greased a little bit. So yet again, I'm becoming more and more impressed. Put a little grease on that anyway. Alright. So I got this 28 that I was running. I can't remember what saw it was, but it was one of them. So it looks like I had adapted it for something. Huh. Isn't that interesting? Alright, whatever. It should work, right? Well, here's a couple of first starts. That's the original Bling saw that I brought back to life after it got run over by a tractor. And right next to it, to the right, is a new out-of-the-box Holzfforma g3120. And now, of course, Bling saws had a fair amount of runtime on the channel, but I haven't used it in quite some time. And the Holzfforma has never been started. So what I had to do with the Holzfforma, just so I could have something to run, is I put a different sprocket on there because it had a 404, so I put 3/8 on it, 3/8/7. So it's not going to show anywhere near what the cutting speed that thing might be capable of. My hunch is on a short 28-inch bar for that saw. Kind of looks tiny, doesn't it? 8-pin minimum, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know what kind of RPMs they turn. We're going to figure that out as time goes on. But I think this is going to be sort of an adventure, and we'll figure out what we can do with that saw. You know, my first instinct on something that big is bucking and milling. You're certainly not going to do lemon and felon with it. It's too big. But so let's just see if we can get them started. Start with that. And I'm going to let that Holzfforma run however they tuned it. Hopefully it's a little fat for a little bit until it breaks in some, you know, and then maybe in the next video I'll start tuning on it to try to get it to run better. But right now, the definition of win is if it just starts. That's both of them, actually. So one of the beauties about auto tunes is the primer. You know I'm going to have a full load of fuel in that carburetor in this saw because of the primer. Now this is one of the ones where I jacked the compression, and now I'm kind of wishing I didn't, just for ease of use. I may actually go back and put a stock gasket in this saw if I start using it again. All right, we're going to do two things here. One is to see if that's oiling properly, and the second is to give the 562 another chance. So, but if that's oiling, then I'm going to have to go back and die grind on the bar. It looks to me like it could be my blended bar. So let's just see. Yeah, it's pumping it right out. So it's got to be my bar. So I'll work on that for a little bit. But before I do anything, I am going to see if the 562 runs. That was the other saw, right? It runs. Yeah, it's a beast. No doubt. It's oiling. And most certainly is. It's just my bar is not letting it do its thing. And it starts and restarts. I had to fiddle with the idle a little bit, but the more I run this saw, the better it gets. This is beginning to make me think of the G3120, where it was a little bit rough going in the beginning, but once it had runtime, it just got better and better and better. And honestly, never stopped getting better until I gave it away, because it was pretty much taking all the oxygen out of my
my chainsaw experience. I was running it all the time instead of going back to my vintage saws and my built 5.72s and stuff like that. Partly because it worked good, and partly because it didn't have, a lot of money into it. Well, this saw right here is not going to be the same, just simply because it's just so big. I'm not going to go fell with a saw like this. So I guess the next question is why? Why would a person have something like this? And based on the scenarios that I can think of, does this particular saw fit that bill? And before I even get into the scenarios, the answer is I don't know yet. My first impressions on this is pretty good, but it makes me smile. It's a beast. So fun. That's a reason to have something like this. You want to have a little bit of fun. And there's nothing like 100-something cc saw. I have my solo that I've run for a bunch of times. So, I'm not new to the big saw thing. So there's a fun factor. That's a reason to have them. I would suspect that most people who are going to get into a saw like this are going to do it because they want to have something like unique, big, fun. I think there's a lot of potential in this saw if you want to make it go fast. So that's another reason if a person wants to start with an inexpensive, big machine that they want to make go a lot faster. The build quality, for what I can tell, is not bad. We'll see. We'll see if things break, but right now it's not bad at all. I got to sort out the oiling, and I've had issues before with oiling. Sometimes it's the bar, and sometimes, even though when the bar is off, if the pump is letting things flow, it gives you a false sense. And sometimes it's the pressure. It can't generate the pressure to push the oil. In this case, it's just spilling out, so I think it's my bar. So another reason to have a saw like this is milling. Those Lucas mills where you have a pretty much fixed power head, where you're not having to carry, you're letting the machine carry the saw. I think that's actually a decent application. I think this has got all the power in the world. It really does, from what I can tell. And this is not broke in. This is like the first half a tank. And I learned with my 395, it took 3 or 4 tanks before it began to settle out. I kept playing with the carburetor. The next time I ran it was a little different. And then eventually it got stable to the point where it was stable for several years. So this one will probably go that same route. So yeah, I got it stable today, but tomorrow it might be different. And my experience has been with these saws from over in China, that you got to let the diaphragm soak up the gas, change their characteristics a little bit, break in, do the things they do, and then after a period of time they settle out. And I suspect this is going to be the same. But that's the second scenario. First one just being fun. You get something like this, it's $500, $400, whatever it costs, and it can be literally tons of fun. It makes me smile, I can tell you that, just having that thing blast and do the things it does and have this fountain of chips. Wait until you see this with a good chain. I have to say, the third cut through, I heard it snag, and I looked over here and I've gone through 2 nails already. I don't even want to look at the chain. It doesn't slow it down, it just pushes a little harder. So, fun, milling, the Lucas type mills where it's a fixed power head makes more sense. A young fella's not going to have a problem with this. An old guy like me, that's a lot of weight. That's probably 23 pounds sitting right there, 24 pounds with the bar and chain. Another place this might sit is on big trees on the landing. A lot of guys, a bucking saw where you have a big horsepower saw with a big bar. That's what I'm going to probably use the saw for, is bucking up the logs. Why not? I got it, right? I'll probably get a little longer bar. Some of the trees I got to do this year. You can see this is a 28. I'm not getting through this tree. I really need like a 32 or a 36 on these trees. I really do. So bucking, that's another reason to have something like this. I guess another reason is if you happen to be into the clone saws, and there's people who are, it's the biggest, baddest clone saw in the market right now. And I had the 88 of the 888, and I can tell you this thing here is a beast as compared to that. That was a big mellow monster. It's sitting around somewhere in the barn, I think, but this guy here has more snap than that saw did. I'm not going to do a direct comparison. I just want this saw to prove itself by itself. And once I get some time on it, like maybe 6 months, a year, or something like that, maybe I'll start doing other comparisons. But first, let's just see what it does as it sits. And so there's a few reasons the person's going to want a big displacement saw. Fun, milling, bucking, If you're a Holzfforma fan, you got to have one of these. You can't not have one of these. Got to have a G3120. That's your work saw. And you got to have one of these. So I guess my first experience with this has not been that frustrating. It's been pretty what I expected, number one, and it's been a little bit of fun for me, number two. So that's 2 saws in one day. I got this thing going. I got Bling saw going. Bling saw's back. It's going to probably get a long light bar. By the way, just as a side note, the reason why I got rid of the light bars on my felling saws and my work saws, they may show up on things like this or a Bling saw, is I've experienced flex. They're very flexible. And when they flex too much, they toss a chain. And I just don't want it. And the solid Husqvarna X Tough bar is not that much heavier, and it's a lot stiffer. And the steel bars, the nice steel bars, are the same. Yeah, you can get the lightweight one, but their pro level bar and Husqvarna's pro level bar is a better choice if you're actually working the saw. Now, since this is going to be a play saw, it might see a light bar because it's only going to be doing like this. I'm not going to have it in a tree and having it hang off the bar and stuff like that, or pushing at an angle where it might bend a bar and throw a chain. So yeah, this one might see a light bar. The Bling saw probably will. It'll probably get the 28-inch light bar. But for my work saws, X Tough all the way. C83. Oh, one last thing. This was the Holzfforma chain. I've got a new loop for it. Let me show you the package. And here's my, no pun intended, cut on that, is they sharpen up nice. Out of the box, they're like pretty much anything else. Full chisel, LGX, LPX, any of them. The C83 pretty much cuts better than anything right out of the box. Problem with C83 is that when you have to sharpen it, you can never get it back to where it was. Here's the package. I got a couple of these, and I got them for that Husky bar, and I actually used them on my last felling operation just to see how they work. They work pretty good. I mean, they didn't cut like a C83, but like I said, well, the C83 will spoil you for the first, couple of hours. When they start getting dull, you want to put a file to them. That's where this stuff begins to catch up. Or the Steel RS, which actually wears even better, just a little harder. But yeah, for what these are, yeah, that's what you have right there. And it just went through 2 nails. I'm kind of curious to see if it broke any of the top plates. But that's what I'm going to be running on that saw, is this stuff right here. So evaluate them both. When I first saw the color, it's a little bit lighter, it kind of threw me back to those first 372s, which were kind of cheese ball. And the same with the color on this rubber that goes on the aluminum. But I'm here to tell you the plastic is way better. This plastic is at the same level as the G395. And this bar is a lot stiffer. Where those bars, I could flex them with my hands, no problem. This seems to have a little bit more meat. I am probably going to get a stock OEM bar for this anyway and just compare. But right now, that's a perception. I don't know if it's a reality. There's really nothing to this point in time that just strikes me as I got to change this right now. What I'm getting out of this saw right now is I just got to run it for a little bit and let it break in. Like I said, let the rubber parts break in and just run it. I don't have to do anything to it. Find a better bar for it so it can oil better. But just run it. That's really what I'm getting out of this. Whereas in the past, like with the steel clone 660s, you almost immediately had to go change the choke and throttle. You could feel it. They're all flimsy and flexible. So stuff like that on those saws, it was like immediately when you ran the saw, you said, I got to do these things. The bar studs on those, man, you strip them out the first time you try to push real hard. On this saw right here, nah, I don't see anything, you know. And the G288, I had problems with its oil pump, which is why I'm a little bit kind of wonky on this right now. I don't want to go back there. That went back and forth in that for quite some time. And then the G395 worked beautifully. There was nothing. So, you know, I had to change the piston out because it was a pre-production saw, and the piston taper, it had none. It rattled like crazy. I ran it for, my God, a month like that, and then I put a Little Red Barn pop-up in that thing, which I don't know if it was a blessing or a curse because it made it hard to pull over, but it ran beautifully. And I never had a problem. Like I said, I put 2 full seasons and part of a 3rd season on that saw. Didn't have a problem. And so the build quality on that saw was good. I think this saw, my first impression is this is going to follow suit of those 2 saws, the G288 and the G395, not the ones I had prior, like the 372 and the smaller steel clones, which I had issues with. This one here is, I'll tell you what, it feels like it's a solid saw.